So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Sonic Hedgehog. So let's start the series. There are many miracles in the world, from animals to the climate, but the most amazing of these are people, from those who use Kai to those who use chakra. Initially, the social request was out of balance, because the priestess of 6 ways was only willing to force women to use chakra, but priests were able to demonstrate everything they needed to know about Kai control at that point. Kai control became awkward around women over time, but they made progress with males, until they were on an equal footing with women. Shortly after, when Kunoichi began to carve out a path as a military-focused occupation, tribes began to emerge alongside bloodline boundaries. As Kunoichi became more common, so did Kai controllers, who learned and created many godlike hand-to-hand combat techniques. Kai experts established schools, dojos, and sanctuaries to demonstrate future male human expressions that were passed down, and eventually everything found a sense of fulfillment. While male Kai clients could duplicate with any woman, and young women and children didn't have to worry about their children not being able to use Kai, women, who were more straightforward, needed to devise a way to ensure that more females would be conceived. To ensure that females would be conceived, they created a seal that briefly exposes women to male genitalia, allowing tribes to remain unadulterated. Although this tactic primarily resulted in the introduction of a young woman, there have been rare instances of young men being introduced to the world by a female on a female association. Typically, young men who are naturally introduced to a female faction are placed in the shelter, but it is much less common for some to be kept within the group. Bristle imprints and all, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was one of these children, born the youngest of 7, and the primary child of Minako Namikaze, the 4th headmaster, an SS rank Kunoichi, and Naruto's mother, Uzumaki, a very attractive habanero, an S rank Kunoichi, both of whom had amazing reputations and, surprisingly, more notable skills to support them. As of right now, the 9-year-old male hero was walking down the main street towards home. Naruto was wearing a white silk shirt with gold sleeves that were too long, dark shorts with gold blazers sewn on the sew, and a pair of dark shoes to complete the ensemble. Naruto had his hands behind his head to keep his sleeves from hanging. In reality, he hated the clothes his family had given him because they always made him feel like a target. His clothes were too expensive and ostentatious, and even the slightest tug could cause them to tear. He couldn't help but walk around and listen to the people's quiet whispers as they passed by him. One woman asked her buddy, "Hello, isn't that the little sweetie of the headmaster's family?" with a heart full of happiness. The other one responded, blushing, "It's undeniable that I can't fully accept that he's out without assistance from anyone else without one of his kin." With her hands on her nuclear red cheeks, the first person said, "You think we can go around there and talk to him? Maybe if we close now we can stay around him all the time." Hearing every word, Naruto scowled because he had no idea how every woman he encountered was constantly fond of him, treated him like a priceless treasure, or viewed him as a glass doll to be truly cared for. He just didn't understand that he wasn't any different from everyone else. Sure, he was a child born into a Kunoichi family, but that didn't make him special. The males were then the exact opposite. "Goodness Kami, it's that little whelp again," a man said angrily, frowning at Naruto. "Ugh, for what reason did he need to come out today? I would rather not watch as each female faints and twists around for him," the other woman said. After hearing the two men's disapproval, Naruto frowned even more and asked them to treat him that way. While he was still in his opinions, one of the town's young men approached him. The child grinned and gestured, eager to play with a boy his own age. "Hello, Naruto, need to play tag with us," the child said, pulling Naruto out of his line of sight. Just as Naruto was about to run off to play with them, an Anbu unexpectedly appeared, startling both Naruto and the child. The Anbu remarked, "Naruto-sama, your family is expecting you home immediately," which was a false statement. Although Naruto's family was anticipating his return, the Anbu didn't need him to get hurt while playing with the other young men, and the way she was able to get him home didn't hurt either. Needing to play and form friendships like any other child, Naruto said, "Maybe I could play with them for just a little while at any point." "I'm sorry Naruto-sama, yet I should get you home before family begins stressing," replied the Anbu. But before Naruto could say anything, the Anbu grabbed him and shunned him, leaving a child confused and a little annoyed that he couldn't make another friend. Compound of Uzumaki Namikaze. Before she followed him inside, Naruto and the Kunoichi arrived at the front entrance of his family's compound. Since this is a Kunoichi family, the patio was only an exceptionally large preparation field for his mother and sisters to use. As Naruto approached the front entryway, he went for the handle to open it, but one of the Kunoichi guarding the front opened it for him. The compound was huge and incredibly great overall, with a large yard full of small but excellent situations, a long walkway to the front entryway, and 2 enormous koi lakes toward the front. "There you go Naruto-sama," the Kunoichi said with a smile, and Naruto returned the smile as he walked inside, a little tense. Naruto shouted, "I'm home," as he closed the door behind him. Suddenly, with what sounded like a charging bull, Naruto was knocked down by red and yellow haze. After opening his eyes, Naruto looked down at his chest to see what had struck him, and he saw 2 sets of violet-blue eyes that belonged to his older twin sisters, Naruko and Narumi. With a lovely scowl, Narumi asked, Naruto, where have you been? Your Wani-samas have missed you. Naruto also said, perhaps he just needed to make us stress to make sure we would hop on him, with a charming pout that turned into a kind smile. Naruto replied, you understand what this calls for Narumi, as her face became coquettish. Narumi said, indeed I know, with a coquettish expression of her own. Before kissing their sibling, the two of them cried out, three-way kiss. The two young women moaned as they savored the taste of their siblings' lips, while keeping their eyes closed and kissing Naruto on the lips. Goodness my, a voice said. Another voice remarked, I didn't realize you all felt as such about one another. When Narumi and Naruto woke them up, they were kissing each other instead of Naruto. Their eyes widened before they fell to pieces with a wet slap, and they were both choking, spitting, and washing their mouths before visiting their older twin sisters, Rias and Yang. As Yang chuckled and Rias smiled teasingly, they both yelled, NRDO. Using NRDO. After leaving Narumi and Naruto, Naruto walked into the kitchen and grabbed a skillet, some vegetables, rice, chicken, and soy sauce, to make some pan-fried food. Before he could finish, someone took the dish from him, turned on the oven, placed a container on it to warm up, and started chopping the vegetables. Naruto looked at the person and couldn't help but mutter. There's I can make my own food, Naruto remarked, his face displaying annoyance. With a particular smile, Urza replied, gibberish sibling, you just go play while your Wani-chan makes your food. Before adding the rice, she heated up some oil. With growing annoyance at not being able to take care of himself, Naruto remarked, you know eventually you all must allow me to learn all alone, you can't cook me perpetually. Baba's younger sibling Wani-chan will continuously show up for you, particularly to cook, Urza replied, her smile becoming into a smile. Under his breath, Naruto murmured, I would like to think not, it'd be more straightforward to show me, you cooking is a deathwish, with a blank expression on his face. Urza asked, not really hearing Naruto, what was that? And RDO responded stoically, I set the rice as ablaze. Urza looked at Naruto flickering before looking in the oven to make sure the rice was burning. Urza went crazy and extinguished the fire right away before the smoke alarms could sound. I'm going higher up, could we let mother cook from this point forward, you simply stick to battling. Naruto simply shook his head and walked up the stairs to his room, while Urza simply laughed and smiled nervously. At the point when Naruto got up to his room, he shut the entryway prior to going to his bed to sit down. As he was setting down, he started to contemplate his short 9 years of life up to this point, as far back as he could recall any, and everything had been finished for him by each female he at any point met, from his aunties Iroko, Jirona, and Tsunade to his moms and more seasoned kin, to simply a regular female off the road. While at first this sort of life is perfect, as he progressed in years, Naruto viewed this way of life as exhausting and calm crazy quick. He could do nothing for him, and when he says anything he makes a difference. He was unable to run someplace, get something, or read something without some arbitrary kunoichi conveying him, getting the item. Or his family taking the book saying he didn't have to stress himself over picking up something hard, and giving him a fantasy book called Things Considered, which he probably tossed into the garbage when no one was looking. While most would kill for this benevolent life, they'd get exhausted with it rapidly. Naruto calculated that he ought to figure out how to accomplish difficult work and live on his own now, so he doesn't wind up a nitwit relying upon others constantly. Damnation, his family wouldn't actually give up to a regular citizen school. That is the way ludicrous his life is at the present time. A thump on his doorway startled Naruto out of his reverie as he lay on his bed, so he went up and opened it. One of his older sisters, Level Uzumaki Namikaze, was still present. Level remarked, sibling supper's prepared, before grabbing him by the wrist and dragging him down the stairs to the dinner table. After his sister sat down across from his twin at the table, Naruto had some space to look about at his loved ones. The first were Narumi and Naruto, who were 10 years older than him and charming. They were the youngest twins with a lot in common. They had similar haircuts, eyes, noses, mouths, and face shapes, but other than that, they were completely different. When a maverick Uchiha went after Naruto mom and delivered the monster at the same time, Naruto was just brought into the world, and during all the chaos, the third headmaster fixed the Bijuu inside the young ladies at the cost of her life, while Minako kept her alive. Narumi was the more mature of the two, with red hair like their mother, violet blue eyes, pale coloring, and bristle blemishes on her cheeks. Naruko was the younger and more active of the two. She had light hair like Minako, which she wore in ponytails at the nape of her neck, violet blue eyes, and cheek stubble. Naruto turned to face the family's second set of twins. The second most seasoned friendly twins, Ryuz and Yang Uzumaki Namikaze, are 2 years older than him. Even at the age of 11, it was already clear that these two would be exceptional pleasures going forward. With her red hair touching her upper back and a single strand standing up on her head, shining blue eyes, and a pale complexion, Ryuz the Redeed was a rich delight who was beginning to take shape. She was acting like a princess to everyone she met, but only her family and close friends knew how ridiculous she could be. Assuming Ryuz was tasteful, Yang was captivating with her wild light hair that reached the middle of her back, and her brilliant violet eyes. She was full of life and carefree and was always down for a long time. As an aside, she hates people touching her hair and tells bad jokes. Erza and Level, the final and most experienced sets of twins, are the subject of Naruto. Erza was the leading example when it came to development. Although she was only 12 years old at the time, she was beautiful with her long red hair, pale complexion, and violet eyes. She is the epitome of Naruto mom. Her age does not reflect her behavior, as she constantly tries to be responsible for her younger family members, especially Naruto. Despite being the most mature at times, she can occasionally be the most whimsical and fun tooth. She has a terrible sweet tooth and is an absolutely terrible cook. One word to describe her. Level, quiet, or in any case, when she was younger, she seemed calm, collected, and mostly unaffected by anything around her. She was wonderful, if a little more fascinating, than her twin, with her light blue eyes, profound tan composition, and short light hair with 3 single strands that had globules in them. She really stood out among her loved ones. Naruto's mother was speaking to him as he continued to look about at his family. Naruto asked, "What was that, Ka-san?" Naruto perspired at this. "2 things, first call me Ka-chan," she added. "And second, I said you ought to eat your food before it gets cold," her mother said with a smile. After Naruto finished eating, he got up with his plate and went to the sink to wash it. Similarly, as he was about to turn on the water, Yang took the plate from him before he could wash it himself. Naruto looked around and saw that the rest of his family was sitting tight for him, which was sufficient for him to start eating, and everyone else to follow suit. Naruto said, "Yang, I can wash my own plate," interfering. Yang said, washing his dish while making a terrible joke, "Try not to be senseless, just go higher up and play, don't stress over it, Yang, huge sister has got this." Erza remarked, "Ugh Yang, that joke was awful." "You're simply envious you can't be pretty much as interesting as me," replied Yang. Once more, an RDO had risen higher before Yang and Erza could really start fighting. When he arrived at his room, he lay on his bed and started thinking about his life. He couldn't do anything for his family, whom he loved deeply, but they could be completely overwhelming. He couldn't go anywhere without them worrying about him. Damnation. Once while running, he fell and scratched his knee, leaving only a few pieces of blood, but his family was so scared that they rushed him to the clinic, as if he had broken his leg. When Naruto heard Minako telling everyone that she was heading upstairs to get some rest in preparation for an early morning tomorrow, he got out of bed to speak with his mother. He quickly averted his gaze as he entered his parents' room, blushing at seeing his mother in stockings and underwear. Naruto said, "Wow, Mom, put on some clothes. I want to talk to you," but was still dismissed with a nuclear blush. Minako laughed as she watched her kids flush, then walked up behind him, folded her arms around him in a tender embrace, and kissed him on the cheek. Minako exclaimed gleefully, "Would it be that my sweet young man needs?" Naruto made a sound as though to say when he saw that his mother refused to let him go or put on clothes. In spite of everything, Naruto requested, "I was trusting you would allow me to go to the new Innovation Headways display at the Set of Experiences Gallery 1 week from now." He was confident that she would concur that, in fact. After having these kinds of conversations with Naruto in the past, Minako whispered that she understood he was a very curious child who wanted to learn about the world and its secrets, but she simply couldn't let him go off on his own without assistance from others, or even to the gallery, without requiring him to stuff his tiny head with unnecessary items. As Minako put it, "Naruto, you realize Mama doesn't need you proceeding to fill your head with perilous and superfluous things like that. Imagine a scenario in which you get lost, or you get captured by some obscure kunoichi, or worse, you attempt to get excessively engaged with this sort of stuff and get injured. Your mother just couldn't deal with it in the event that occurs." In an effort to achieve all he could possibly desire for once, Naruto said, "Yet, mother, I will not get injured, it's simply the exhibition hall." As Minako was about to respond, the doorway opened to see Naruto's mother and his 2 older sisters entering and looking at him worriedly. In a sincere attempt to demonstrate to Naruto how much better his life is right now, his mother stated, "Naruto, darling, listen, we realize you need to find out more, yet you don't have to. You simply sit and allow us to deal with you. You don't need to make the slightest effort." Erza uttered the words, "Definitely Atoto, you have the best life possible, a caring family, the very best and most recent toys, costly planet garments, and everything is finished for you," unable to comprehend why her younger sibling kept making such a noise over this. For a brief moment, everything was silent as the family acknowledged that they had reached Naruto, but they could see that he was trembling, and that his bangs were covering his eyes. They also planned to try to console him, but Naruto spoke. "It's a little unreasonable. I simply need to be typical to do ordinary youngster things like run, hop, and play yet. Rather I'm cooped up in a curiously large house very nearly all day, every day not ready to do a thing for myself. You know, when I was heading back home a kid my age requested to play with me. I was so energized at the possibility of make a companion, my most memorable male companion at that, yet not long before I could say okay some arbitrary ambu. It was without a doubt watching me from the shadows, bounce down and essentially let me know that I can't play with that youngster and his companions, yet fundamentally hauled me back home. Do you know how that affects me? How that causes you to appear to me at whatever point one of you or some irregular kunoichi acts like that? It resembles all of you see as some item rather than simply your child. I'm not some glass doll, I'm an individual, Naruto at last expressed, taking a gander at his family, with furious tears spilling from his eyes. It was hidden from everyone outside the doorway where the 4 members of the family were crying after listening to their younger sibling reveal so deeply how he thinks about his life at this point. Although they understood that he wouldn't typically care for the opportunity to continue as a typical child, they also realized that he could be seriously harmed, or, more regrettably, they weren't willing to take the risk with him. Naruto's mom and Minako were undoubtedly shocked to hear their little child speak in such a savage tone about his life, and how much he detested it. Minako whimpered before speaking, and Naruto's mother walked up and hugged his side as Minako hugged his other side. Naruto, honey, look, I realize it doesn't appear to be fair at the present time, however you need to comprehend. Your moms understand what they're talking about and doing with regards to the rest of the world. We would rather not control your life, we simply maintain that you should be protected. Minako immediately glanced at Naruto's mom for her talk. Minako-chan is correct, Naruto, the world is hazardous, and you can get injured, so request. Shortly before his mother could finish speaking, Naruto realized the conversation was pointless and broke free from his mother's grasp, hurrying past his sisters along the path to his room, where he firmly shut the door. The rest of the Uzumaki Namikaze family was shocked that Naruto had fled in that direction. Naruto's mother was about to try to console her kid when she felt a hand grab her wrist and hold her back. When she looked around, she saw Minako shaking her head and holding her back. With the dejected and worn-out expression on her face, Minako stated, "Leave him be, Kushi-chan, he really wants time to be distant from everyone else, and quiets down, we'll talk with him tomorrow." Naruto's mother initially appeared hesitant before muttering in shame while sitting on their bed. She only needed to visit Naruto and give him some encouragement if he was lucky, but she then realized that Minako was right, and that he should have been kept apart from everyone else at this moment, in order to calm himself. Level and Ursa had left their parents' room to visit their younger relatives, without saying anything before walking to their common area, and briefly glancing at Naruto's entrance before entering and shutting it. The other young women retired to their own common areas, each reflecting on what Naruto had told their parents. Naruto lay on his bed with his face buried in his cushion and angry tears running down his cheeks. It was just a bit absurd that they could treat him like this. After all, he was their child, but more importantly, he was a person with needs of his own. With anger and resentment in his voice, Naruto remarked, "It's ridiculous, why would they ever allow me to be normal? I can't do anything by myself, and I don't even have friends my own age that aren't related to my sisters." When he looked out his window at the twilight, he noticed a hummingbird in a bright enclosure hurrying around in search of a way out. He felt bad for the poor creature trapped in an enclosure with no way out and no opportunity, but then he saw the bird fly over to the enclosure entryway, and, realizing that the hook was free, it used its long nose to fix the lock, before pushing the entryway and taking off completely. Before acquiring a determined gaze everywhere, Naruto looks at the screen in pure shock. "I must get out of this town if I want to continue living my own life." Because of the expensive fabric of the clothes, Naruto pressed a bag full of them to either wear or sell for money. Now, all he had to do was wait. Being no fool, he knew he couldn't just up and leave like that, even though he knew there were 12 kunoichi watching him closely whenever he was in the town. He also knew there were many more people patrolling his family's compound, and he would undoubtedly be caught if he simply tried to leave with an agreement. Naruto would have to wait until they switched shifts from the cautious Joun into the slightly less prepared. He could flee in the middle of shift changes. When the kunoichi switched shifts for monitor duty, they frequently failed to take their surroundings into account as much as they should. Almost no hours after the event, Naruto saw his chance and grabbed his sack, arranged his clothes according to his size and level, and laid them out on his bed before covering it. He then proceeded to bounce from the window to the shrubberies, holding up a piece before he got out, and quickly left the front entryway, before the watchmen were positioned. He closed the door and began to take the back courses and rear entryways, so that he wouldn't be seen, before he jumped into a covered cart to leave the town. Today I make my own fate. Compound of Uzumaki Namikaze. The room of Naruto. The door to Naruto's room squeaked open, allowing his mother, Naruto's mother, to enter. She understood that Minako had mentioned that they should wait until tomorrow to speak with Naruto, but she simply couldn't, as a loving mother, leave her little child in distress without any form of comfort. With concern in her voice, Naruto mom asked, "Naruto honey, are you conscious?" Naruto mother said, "Ka-chan just needed to talk to you, you know about prior," assuming that is alright, as she walked up to her child's bed. Connecting with a delicate wake, she said, "Naruto-kan please wa," but as she got close to her child's resting body, she sensed that, despite the fact that the shape of the Naruto body was not at all hard like a human body, the Naruto mom removed the covers to look down in sickening fear at a pile of clothes shaped like Naruto. "An RDO," the Naruto mother yelled in utter insanity. The shout drew the attention of the other members of the household, who were shocked to see their sibling or child gone. In a harsh yet exaggerated tone, Minako called out, "Anbu," and a few Anbu arrived shortly after. "My child is missing, scour the town, track down him, and bring him back," Minako said. In a voice full of sadness and anguish, the Naruto mother exclaimed, "Naruto, my little child, where is my little child?" While their parents were gathering a hunting group, the rest of the family was stunned and just had one thought. Where could you be, Naruto? 2 years later. Two figures were walking down an old woodsway. One of them was a young man no older than 11. He was dressed in a bright orange casual shirt, dark wrist warmers, white frayed shorts with brilliant zippers, a dark belt with a silver clasp that had 2 more dark lashes attached to the clasp, and a back hanging at his thighs, and dazzling orange shoes with white sleeve socks, gleaming orange soles, and 3 dark stripes. The young man's most distinctive features were his spiky brilliant light hair that reached the scruff of his neck, clear blue eyes that could embarrass any sea, and 6 stubble marks, 3 on each cheek. This lovely person was Naruto. With just one glance, you can see that Naruto has grown into a handsome little man who will eventually become a much more well-known figure. He is still 5'3". Naruto questioned his traveling companion. It was decent in that enormous town, but it's stunningly better to drive in nature, ha Silva. Genuine Naruto, individuals frequently fail to remember that before these cutting-edge towns we used to reside nearer to nature, and resided close by the creatures in harmony. Actually the main places that have that sort of concordance are West and South Side Island, Silva replied with a broad smile. Silva, who was 6'5" and clearly the more experienced of the two, was a very frightening creature. He had blue-violet eyes with a virus-like edge that was initially sharp but eventually became non-abrasive. Silva was dressed in a light short-sleeved lavender shirt with a Naval Force Blue guide over it, Navy Force Blue combative techniques, pants tied tight with a lavender scarf, lavender leg monitors, and dark hand-to-hand fighting shoes. At the age of 31, Silva was undoubtedly a handsome man with a slightly rakish face that had a hint of feminine non-abrasiveness. His body was built for maximum speed and power, being inclined but slightly bulkier than average. When Naruto left home to gain the experience he generally needed, he got out on a rising cart rolling past the town. No one saw him, but one shadowy figure on the cart hitched a ride with him. As the couple continued to walk along the route, Naruto couldn't help but reflect on everything he had gone through in the last 2 years. When the cart reached a significant distance from the town and stopped to inspect supplies, Naruto jumped out and began to move over the woods without anyone noticing. Despite his quick thinking, Naruto was still a child, so it shouldn't be shocking that after a few days he was lost and suffering from starvation. Similarly, he seemed to be about to bite the dust, but the person who was following him saved him. When he woke up, he noticed that he was covered at a small camping spot, and he looked over to see Silva, 29, the camp's owner, preparing fish over the fire. When Silva noticed that Naruto was conscious, he gave the impoverished child some water in one of the fish. After Naruto finished, Silva asked him why he had gone out into the forest alone. Realizing that lying to the person who had saved him was hardly a good first impression, Naruto gave Silva a brief biography. After Naruto finished his story, Silva reprimanded him for his reckless and incredibly foolish actions, but he understood why he did them, so instead of sending him back to town, Silva had him travel with him, allowing him to explore the world as he needed to. During their journey, Silva made sure Naruto learned the necessary knowledge for each person to work on the planet, as well as how to adapt practically in the wild. In addition to all of that, he taught Naruto the art of Kai and combative techniques. There were many abilities that came with Kai control, such as improving physical abilities, influencing the surrounding area, removing barriers and protective layers, and throwing Kai energy. These abilities are amazing, but they only keep men under Kunoichi in terms of power. However, there is a method that allows men to be on an equal footing with women who use chakra, which is called the 3 orders. The 3 orders separate Kai clients from one another because each person is unique, and the classification that they fall under is the body. Organic. Additionally, super capacity. The more you work on your body and actual ability, the more spectacular it will be. Body capacity considers one actual property to be continuously developed and incremented 10 times with Kai added. When dominated, you will truly desire to control your component as you see fit. Basic capacity allows one to freely control one component, but high-degree Kai control can have amazing repercussions if not prepared as intended. When prepared and opened, super capacity will be your secret weapon in battle. Super capacity is an extraordinary power that is unique to the Kai client who opens it, and to them alone. It may be control over a subcomponent other than the 5 fundamental ones, such as gravity, mental strength, or supernatural power, or it may be truly special capacities, such as turning your skin to steel. After learning and training his body under Silva's guidance, Naruto discovered his body capability after they traveled by boat to West Side Island. He discovered that he could travel at supersonic speeds on the nation-estimated island. At first, he couldn't keep up with his own pace without hurting himself, but as his speed increased, his body couldn't keep up, so Silva had to get more ready, so his body could handle his paces. They went to South Side Island to continue Naruto's preparation in a different climate, after completing an undertaking on West Side Island with enemies, friends, and nearby preparation. What they discovered on the main other nation estimated island was mechanical commotion that he and Silva had to stop their entire stay there, not so unobtrusive future story drop. They returned to the natural countries after their amazing adventures on both amazing islands, with Naruto merely opening his basic potential. Naruto looked down at his hand, which was straining his right arm and containing a small blue glistening wind vortex. When he and Silva first saw his primary power, it was during their continuing days on Southside Island. When it had previously erupted, it had destroyed a great deal of property, and also managed to save Silva's life. When they got a closer, more subdued look at it, Silva told Naruto that it was wind that had blown from his body, just like two of the Kai clients Silva was familiar with. However, the difference between their breeze and Naruto's was that Naruto's had the destructive force and power of a tempest within it. Silva had claimed to have never seen anything like it, and that in order to control it later, an RDO would need to put in a lot of preparation. As he and Silva continued to go through the timberland, Naruto let the vortex to continue until a brilliant light emerged from the true center of the backwoods. Naruto continued to look in awe till he felt a hand grip his shoulder firmly. "What's up, Silva?" Naruto inquired, glancing over his shoulder at his tutor. Having become accustomed to Naruto's tactics, Silva responded with a knowing tone, "Preventing you from running off like you as a rule do in postulation circumstances. In any case, Silva, imagine a scenario where somebody is in peril. We can't simply disregard it, other than we may very well get found out in it on the off chance that anything that is comes searching for us at any rate," Naruto added, while giving a concerned face. After they looked at each other for a little more, Silva finally whimpered and buckled. Silva walked forward with Naruto directly behind him, saying, "Remain behind me and sit idle," with a virus-like tone and a blank expression on his face. They soon noticed a purplish dark orb with glowing varieties twirling on it, as that got closer to the light source. "What is it?" Naruto inquired, his face full of astonishment. "I don't know," Silva said, his eyes wide with surprise. Suddenly, the circle grew so large that it overtook the two of them. When Naruto and Silva looked inside, they noticed a white space filled with beautiful tones swirling about them. They soon identified a raised stone area with a figure seated on it, and as they got closer, they realized the figure was everything but human. The animal that remained on the elevated area was nearly as tall as Naruto, with pupilless green eyes, two hair-like limbs encircling its round face, and two larger limbs running down its back. It had an adjusted horn that stood as far away from it as possible, and inside it was a small organ that resembled a cerebrum. It had two toe-like members on its enormous feet, three finger-like extremities on its enormous hands, and finally, the entire animal seemed to be composed of strong water. Having never seen anything like it in his brief but daring life, Naruto stared at the strange aquatic creature in utter awe. Silva maintained his emotionless exterior once more, but inside he was in shock, evaluating the animal to look for any weaknesses in case the creature in front of them turned out to be dangerous. It didn't seem like Silva was too dim to realize that he could easily defeat this animal. Silva stepped forward and made a sound as though to communicate before speaking to the creature. Silva asked, "Who are you? Will be you companion or adversary?" As his hand slowly clenched and released a wisp of Kai that was blue and purple in tone. Before Naruto and Silva received mental messages from the creature they discovered, Turmoil, the animal did not respond for a little moment. They captured the whole life of Mayhem, who was formerly a small animal known as a chow, before coming into contact with what many called the expert emerald, and transforming into the animal that was left in front of them. Naruto exclaimed with enthusiasm, "Cool, so what occurred straight away?" Before intellectually continuing with its tale, Confusion Eyes smiled at the child and explained to them how it became the Watchman King of the magnificent drifting landmass, coexisting peacefully with the locals and protecting them. Silva, who had heard the narrative from his master normally while he was getting ready, exclaimed in shock, "So the legends are valid. There was once a flying landmass north of millennia prior." Tumult then showed them images of it becoming out of hand because of the covetous and belligerent town manager, who felt that he should have more authority to expand his town area. In the process, he attacked and injured many Chow in the Chow Garden, where the knowledgeable Emerald lived. Naruto was astounded by these images, and Silva had a dejected expression on his face because, even though he had witnessed such things by the end of the day, and had stopped a couple with the help of his lord and siblings, and this had occurred thousands of years earlier, it didn't make it any less inappropriate or inciting. The images showed chaos turning into a terrifying water beast that divided the mainland into three parts. The right side was projected south, ultimately crashing into the sea and becoming known as Southside Island, while the left side was projected west, eventually becoming known as Westside Island. Silva was taken aback by this as, like most people, he had no idea where the islands originated or how they came to be, even if he was likely aware that the two islands were sacred and amazing on their own. The images demonstrated how, as chaos continued its rampage, a young child, the famished boss's girl, begged the expert emerald to assist her in putting an end to the chaos. After hearing the young woman's request, the expert emerald granted the young woman the authority to put an end to the chaos, and the boss's little girl gave her life, using her spirit as the catalyst to seal confusion into the expert emerald, bringing an end to the chaos. Without a doubt, Naruto witnessed chaos in a state of shock, awe, and hesitancy. Come on, could you possibly blame him at any point? Wouldn't you be a little uneasy if you were in front of a creature that essentially devastated an entire continent? Silva looked at Mayhem for a few moments, trying to figure out what to think of this animal. On the one hand, Confusion had not shown any hostility toward him or Naruto, and had curiously given them its biography. On the other hand, Silva simply saw how strong this animal really is, and he also realized that he had cut-off points, and that he would undoubtedly die without his siblings present. How could it be that you got away? Asked Silva, who was genuinely curious as to how this creature managed to get past a powerful seal. Naruto and Silva demonstrated how the spirit of the central girl, who served as the seal's inspiration, had died, leaving the seal incredibly fragile, and giving Disorder the opportunity to flee within 3 years. Naruto asked, so what do you need now? After examining the two, Disarray came to the conclusion that it required both the replacement and harmony. Not because of the main response, but because of the second, both Naruto and Silva looked at Mayhem with wide eyes. It was startling and remarkable to see someone replace a creature with such intense reflections. Naruto looked at Silva with huge glittering eyes, thinking that he was going to gain some incredible power from turmoil, and become much more powerful than he had been before. This left Naruto in awe, and Silva was equally astounded that the animal that was still in front of them intended to give him power, which was the primary explanation he could think of. Although Naruto was a skilled animal, he was still a child, and there couldn't have been another animal or person present with whom Disorder could have a conversation. Feeling that someone else could use this power more effectively than he could, Silva remarked, I'm regarded that you would pick me for this extraordinary power, but I can't acknowledge such power. You ought to give it to somebody seriously meriting. Confusion turned and pointed at Naruto after shaking its head to indicate that it was not talking about Silva. With utter surprise, Naruto questioned, you're picking me, yet why? Silva also appeared shocked, but he remained silent because he wanted to know why Confusion had chosen Naruto to take his position. It showed how it could see the entire world through the expert emerald, and how it had been watching Naruto from the day before he took off to his endeavors on South Side and West Side Island, up until this point. Bedlam intellectually demonstrated that even though he was fixed inside the expert emerald, he was not completely cut off from the outside world. Disorder explained how things were looking for a good, brave, kind, and truly chivalrous person to replace it. Considering that Silva suited this portrayal well, Naruto fit far better. Naruto was shocked to learn that he intended to acquire this power, and had no idea what to think. He needed to explore the world and do amazing things, but was he really ready to do something like this? Was he ready for this kind of liability? The thought of it made his stomach turn and made him feel uneasy. Naruto hoped to see Silva looking at him with eyes like a father looking at his kid with devotion, care, and comfort for themselves and them alone, but a firm hand placed itself on his shoulder, jolting him out of his thoughts of anguish. Naruto, calm down. I know that this is a lot to process, and that this is a huge burden being placed on you right now. Just remember that you are a child, and that your entire future is in front of you. Regardless of whether you choose this, it is your choice, and there is no right solution for this. This is about the very thing you need, Silva said, placing a delicate yet firm crush on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto took a few deep breaths and closed his eyes as he thought over what Silva had just said. This was his decision, no one else's, and there was no right or wrong answer he could accept or, in effect, reject the response that was provided in what he required. I'll do it, I'll be your replacement and turned into the new gatekeeper of the drifting island, Naruto said earnestly after waking up and looking at Confusion with determined eyes before speaking. Prior to raising its hands aloft, stacked with a hole in between, and appearing to be focused, Bedlam's eyes smiled at the child. A faint murmur soon followed, grew louder, and then a shimmering sea blue orb appeared between its outstretched hands. Bedlam explained that the circle was all in case his confused energy was concentrated in a concentrated structure. It also explained why Naruto would gain turbulent energy and powers from it, and be sent to the floating island with Silva to begin his experience. Thus, before veering off in the direction of the island, the circle swiftly expanded, submerging all three of the previous ones high in a white-blue shimmering shaft. Naruto looked back at Bedlam, who was vanishing into energy fragments of bewilderment. Hello, before I fail to remember, what is the name of the island we're going to? Naruto asked. Bedlam's eye smiled and spoke as it completely vanished from view. Holy Messenger Island. With that, Mayhem blurred blissfully, recognizing that it had someone to take its place in protecting the Heavenly Messenger Island, and possibly carrying out much more significant tasks on Earth. Naruto and Silva were taken to Holy Messenger Island, where they embarked on their most recent and significant adventure that would likely alter them, and possibly the entire world. Heavenly Messenger Island is a peaceful island that has endured for millennia without war, famine, or plague. It has a rich history and legacy that goes deep into its foundations, but most people don't know or trust that the nation-measured island exists. All of the legend's texts have been lost to time, so most information was passed down by listening in on other people's conversations, but north of millennia, the information has also been lost. Those who realize reality have long since left the Pure Lands, while others who have heard the stories either start to ignore them or make them seem like fantasies. Many pilgrims have traveled in search of the Fable Island, but have returned without finding anything, possibly because the one crucial piece of information that was lost to time was that the island must be found among the mists. On Holy Messenger Island, we come to a huge clearing surrounded by trees with a few bright blossoms. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the brambles. It was a 12-year-old blonde child with bristles and blemishes on his cheeks. It was Naruto. Over the past year, he had changed significantly. He was now 5'4", his hair was at the nape of his neck, and his face had become slightly more angular. His attire had also changed slightly. He kept his orange and dark high erosion opposition sparkle shoes and white frayed shorts with his belt and lashes, but he swapped his wrist warmers for dark fingerless gloves that had a single brilliant metal star with a round red gem on the back of each glove, and an orange casual shirt with a brilliant star on the front to finish the look. When he and Silva arrived at Holy Messenger Island, they immediately entered the center zone by mistake. 1. They then proceeded to other zones, not intending to stay there for more than a moment, until the final zone master, 2, saved them. Following the entire experience of rescuing the center zone in this way, saving all zones, and stopping the cunning sky beast, 3, they were finally prepared to arrive at Heavenly Messenger Island. Another figure dashed out toward the clearing's middle, where Naruto would land, as Naruto glided through the air toward it. The figure stayed at a height of 9'5", and had 4 vertical eyes, 1 in the front, 2 on the sides, and 1 on the back of its head with yellow sclera, red iris, and white understudies. Its body type was strong at this point, and worked for speed and power. The animal had dark-fingered paws, and from its hands to its lower arms, it had 5 circles connected by 4 lines that spread upward. Its elbows and knees had white bone-like projections on the sides and top of them, and to complete its appearance, the monster mouth appeared to be a sharp-mouthed jack-o'-lamp. 4. Since Naruto was only an arm's length away, the Zone Executioner balled its ripped hand into a clenched hand before pushing it in his direction. When Naruto saw this, he leaned forward and placed his hands on the Zone Executioner's clenched hand. Shortly before it made contact with him, he used his hands to launch himself over the animal and deliver a back kick to the eye on the back of its head. The Zone Executioner thundered out, closing its eyes in agony, and he turned just in time to see it slip back a few meters from Naruto's lightning-fast punch to the chest. Before snaring, Naruto scrutinized the Zone Executioner with a serious gaze. Naruto commented, "This seems to be the best opportunity to test my new completed strategy," and he was excited to use the process he created by himself. Hoping high, Naruto ran toward the Zone Executioner, moved into the ball, and slowly started to turn. As he got a move on, the blue, shining breeze encircled his structure, helping him gain speed as it turned with him. Soon, he transformed into a rapidly spinning chunk of blue wind, 4, which rammed into the Zone Executioner, lifting it out of sight, just over the trees before striking through its stomach and out of its back. The Zone Executioner was startled to see its tongue sticking out, and all 4 of its eyes sticking out around its head. After floating in midair for a few more seconds, it fell to the earth head first. An enormous cavity was created by the Zone Executioner's loud accident. The monster jerked as its obliterated midriff slowly started to heal, but before it could fully recover, Naruto's turning blue sphere of wind bent through the air and cracked down on the Zone Executioner's upper back with a much stronger accident, kicking up a lot of residue. When the residue had settled, Naruto was seen lowering himself back to a hunched position as the breeze dispersed. He then got up and looked down at the Zone Executioner's remaining body, which was reduced to just its arms and lower body, with the clear indication that its stomach had been struck through. After a few seconds, the rest of the Zone Executioner started to disintegrate, its skin becoming to white smoke and its bones turning to dark residue before fading in the wind. While Naruto watched to make sure the beast had truly died, he was deep in meditation. Great, the procedure worked perfectly, but the power yield is a little tricky to understand, because I had to develop the ability to poke a hole through this thing's stomach, and energy to keep up with the move is really depleting. Reflecting on everything Silva had told him about his power and approach when Naruto had previously tried to plan out on him, Naruto concluded that this was a very decent field test. Flashback. After Naruto revealed what he intended to do with the skill of his dull accretion wind element, Silva retorted, "An address all your own, huh? I don't perceive Naruto acquisitions. A new address is difficult on its own, but creating one, you may not be accessible yet." Sitting in the avant-garde of a blazing test fish, they had prepared and effected for the night. Naruto remarked, "Ah, come on Silva, you act like it's impossible. All I'm aggravating to do is accomplish a move that can use my aspect at its abounding abeyance and capacity," failing to understand why Silva was in charge of such a significant agreement. After auditioning Naruto's tone, Silva draft. Look Naruto, I accept what you're aggravating to say, and I additionally accept what you're aggravating to do, but you accept that acquirements and address on your own is abundantly difficult to do. What you're aggravating to do is actualize one which is on an actually altered level. Your basal wind adeptness is a lot stronger than best added wind elements. Your wind has the force and adeptness of any storm arranged appropriate into it. Air and wind are the aforementioned, but at the aforementioned time different. Air can backpack absurd amounts of force to hit or bang article abroad like with air cannons. Wind on the added duke is added refined. It does not draft or advance things, but rather cut and carve annihilation in its way. Both are acclimated in storms like tornadoes, cyclones, vortex, and hurricanes. For you a simple air advance to a person's stomach can bang an aperture through the maloof like a tornado to the stomach. Do you accept what I'm aggravating to say? Silva explained to Naruto. Naruto looked down at the blaze cerebration regarding what Silva had told him about his wind aspect. He knew that Silva was right and that, if he wasn't careful, he could actually abort or annihilate addition in abundance, but at the same time, he decided to try and complete the address of annihilation abroad aloof to see if he could do it or not. Iapris of Silva, assurance me I know, I cannot alone making myself but others about me if I'm not careful, but at the aforementioned time, you should be able to assurance that if there's an adventitious I can do it that there is additionally an adventitious I can do it, and if there is an adventitious I'd like it, if you could admonition me, so that I don't blend up, Naruto said with confidence in his voice and eyes. Silva gave Naruto a distressed expression, and Buzz gave Naruto a flattering glance. I'm apologetic Naruto I apperceive I shouldn't agnosticism or authority you back, I aloof don't appetite you accepting aching, but if you actually assert I'll admonition you to the best of my abilities, Silva remarked while grinning broadly. Silva and Naruto then started using Naruto's new method. XXXXXXX. End of flashback. When a gigantic adumbration appeared behind him while he was waiting, a breath analgesic was also nearby and could have accidentally knocked him to the ground, but Naruto leaped out of the way before it could happen. He didn't move because he sensed the breath analgesic and was confused because he didn't want to obstruct the alleged breath killer. The point of apples at the breath killer's chest began to glow blaze lavender after Naruto mistook it for the breath analgesic, and he leaped to follow him. From that afterglow, it began to breach afar into dust from its chest to every allotment of the anatomy, with the afterglow overextension out, until it was truly gone, and absolute Silva appropriate after it with his anchor, continued with the lavender afterglow crumbling away. Silva yelled, atomic punch, at Naruto as he hit the ground. Silva said, good assignment assault that breath analgesic Naruto and I also see that your new address is alive great, admitting that I noticed you bear to access the adeptness achievement back you burst into the killer. I also noticed that you slowed down a bit to curse through his abdomen, and back you came back to accomplishment off. Your address is not actually completed. You charge to body up your backbone and adeptness to actually adept it, but all embracing it is actually able and powerful, Silva said as he walked Naruto in awe down to his acme, and proudly rubbed his arch. In gratitude for Silva's praise for his technique, Naruto grinned at him. Naruto closed his eye and muttered, thanks Silva, but there is actually one added botheration to my technique, with a stern expression. Silva's eyes whitened in fear that he may receive harsh criticism for correctly judging Naruto's technique. What is it Naruto? Silva inquired, fearing that something repulsive may be incorrect. I don't accept a name for it, Naruto stated, his articulation and countenance severe. Silva's expression immediately changed to a deadpan before he closed his eyes and let out a sigh. Silva said the words, Naruto, that hardly counts as an austere botheration with the technique, out of fear. Oh appear on Silva, a new move is alone bisected complete afterwards the name, that way it can attending air conditioned and complete air conditioned too, hey biffle the air conditioned makes it way accomplish COOL4, Naruto stated with an artistic grin. When Silva saw that he was willing to accept a correct NRD, he confused his arch once more. Naruto, an address is completed back, and alone back you actually adapted, both in its basal blueprint to its avant-garde forms. Alone back you accept an address central and out, application it the best able agency accessible do you accompany out its abounding potential, Silva said in an austere voice. The alone acumen you charge to name it is to affirmation it as your own in actualization the apple, the assignment and adherence you put into making, booty my diminutive bite for example. My air-conditioned adeptness is actuality able to actualize explosions of assorted admeasurement and actualization in power. The aboriginal I can accomplish it is the admeasurement of a baseball, and a bigger the admeasurement of a mountain, I can use it in altered agency like basic it into a dragon. Aberration out like timberline roots, actualization them like clouds, bulb them like mines, or advance it out on the arena in the surrounding breadth to booty out an ample cardinal of enemies. But my adeptness has the adventitious after effect of possibly communicable my allies in the crossfire, so I spent 3 years advancing up with an address that could do absurd accident to my enemies, but leave my company actually unharmed. That's a back came up with my diminutive punch, adorning the adeptness of my explosions until adeptness broadcast from every distinct corpuscle in my hand. In order to make his anchor flash a fiery lavender with 25 cents worth of despondent lightning arsing off it, Silva curled his duke into it and allowed his skill to breeze into it. Once I did that, I had to actualization and ascendancy it to an amount breadth it wouldn't aloof via baby Shablay's access. Already I punched outwards or hit article or someone, because that could still affect my allies if I absence, and hit them instead of the enemy, so I formed till my diminutive bite had the adeptness to bang aloft acquaintance and advance at an atomic, akin to anniversary corpuscle, causing them to explode, like a virus. The alone acumen I alleged it was to actualization pride appear the address I formed so adamantine to create. Do you understand? Silva inquired. Naruto gazed at Silva with wide eyes. He had never heard Silva mention any of his methods before, and he typically used them in babyish doses. In addition, the actuality Silva took so far proceeded with an achievement he was making. At times, Silva appeared unstoppable and all-knowing. I accept Silva I should adapt my address aboriginal and appropriately name afterwards seeing as I formed so adamantine on authoritative it in the aboriginal place, stated Naruto as he looked at Silva. Abruptly, groups of breath killers surrounded Naruto and Silva as they approached the area. With a fiery fox smile on his face, Naruto remarked, "Looks like I'll be able to get my new move added action accessible and able at the aforementioned time." Silva remarked with a smile on his face, "Good Naruto, use any befalling provided to you to advance yourself, and action is one way to advance action-wise." He then continued to be shocked by how attractive Naruto was to all the breath murderers in the area. Before rushing, Naruto and Silva both grinned to commemorate the anniversary, and the broad killers unleashed a torrent of attacks. In the meantime, Konoha. Once again, the aforementioned was present in the Hidden Blade Apple aggregation, where there was constant concord and joy, and bodies were loved as usual. However, this was not believable because beneath the adored exoteric abounding bodies, there were genuinely unhappy, abnormally assertive bodies. In the office of the headmaster. While Minako was at her appointment, she had finished all of her paperwork, despite her clone's warnings, and had some free time before heading home. During that time, Minako opened a hidden drawer in her board and removed a damaged picture that showed Naruto's surprise at being younger. Minako viewed the story with delight before it was accompanied by intense sadness, because of the fact that her little baby boy had been missing for 3 years without any sign or clue. The ancestors, who were well acquainted with the ridiculous disgust of Naruto's departure, were both chock full of reality as ablaze and admiring little sunspots that they used to be, but they became apathetic and nearly sleepy shells of themselves. Eriko smiled, but anyone could tell that it was a fake one. She wasn't as active as she had been before, and she displayed the affection she typically displayed in waves, which really made her friends nervous. Although Narumi was still trying to be the more amiable of the two, she had adopted a more aggressive stance, snapping at family members and friends for the tiniest aberration or slip-up, which led to numerous arguments between her and Naruto. Back when Naruto left, Yang had lost all self-control and was punching people, screaming, swearing, and acting agitatedly. Minako couldn't even count the number of times she was accused of going to the academy, because of an article Yang wrote about being distant during Aboriginal Month. The only person who could appear next to her after the fact was her best friend Akeno, who was on the accepting end of a base 3D acrimony, and Riaz had become aloof to almost everyone about her except her ancestors, and even then, she had this absent-minded expression on her face. Tia was more blank than before, and she displayed babyish levels of emotion. It would be beneficial to look her in the eyes, but if you make a mistake and take action. Erza became extremely abrasive and ambidextrous, abusing almost everyone because they were Aboriginal. She petrifically aboundingly sent children her age to the hospital to get close to her. Minako was quick to yell at Erza, but it did prevent her from being aggressive with people. The Back's ancestors were able to get her to leave the room, and she was able to break free for her ancestors and booty affliction of herself, but if you look closely, you could see in her eyes that she had divided up her life. Naruto's mother was the most worrisome. After Naruto was gone, all she did was cry uncontrollably in her room, calling out for her son to look surprised, and that she would be a bigger mother to him. Minako sighed when she saw that her son's disappearances were a demographic blow to the family. This is not to say that she wasn't extremely upset about the fact that she and Naruto's mother were attacked by a renegade named Uchiha, and the Kyuubi fled. As befitted her wealth, Minako gave birth to their son using a genspert art powered by seals to accomplish bodies to predict that Naruto's mother was pregnant, and to keep Minako and the impending Naruto safe from enemies alike, with Kyuubi accepting out by way of crudely fake seals. However, as the headmaster, she had to breach able because she didn't accept a distant ancestor to watch over, but an absolute apple, but that didn't stop her from sending out every tracking Kunoichi and a division of the aristocratic Kunoichi to find her son when he vanished. Minako let out another sigh before closing the account. Naruto Amuse returns. The compound of Namikaze Uzumaki. Rido mom was active charwoman up the abode, while the blow of the ancestors was out about the village. She approved to accumulate herself active alive. The moment she chock full she would activate to anticipate of Naruto and Alpha, to breach bottomward again, anytime back Naruto went abroad. The apple aloof seemed a lot beneath bright, what her ancestors knew was the actual centermost of her apple anytime back he was born. Now that's not to say that he was the centermost of the blow of the family's cardinal one, but the actuality of the amount is Naruto mom consistently acquainted added affiliated to him afresh the blow of the family. She, along with the blow of the family, had an adulation for him clashing any of the others, seeing as he was the alone boy in the family. Aback she aboriginal laid eyes on him aback. He was built in, she anticipation that he was a little angel, adored to assimilate them by Kami-sama. It was afresh and there afterwards the abortion with the Kyuubi that she and Minako absolutely. That Naruto's fate would not be like that of added boys built in into clan, to either be accustomed to an abode or fabricated into an ancestry banal, but to be afar of the family, actuality cared for, an adulation with every cilia of their being. Before the window was appealing, Naruto mom sighed. Naruto amuse, be careful and look at home. Kunoichi Academy of Konoha. Both Naruto and Narumi were sitting quietly under the timberline at the rear of the academy. They had not gone any further after an argument broke out between them, and they were severely beaten. Their companions left to watch them from the auxiliary. Bonino Yamanaka almsman to the Yamanaka clan said, "Man, see them like this is harsh." By all accounts, Ino was a very admirable girl. An amethyst shirt with an advanced collar that hung high above her bandaged midriff, a long platinum albino beard that reached the middle of her back. In addition to having a suitable abrupt at her waist and the traditional Kunoichi despondent sandals, she also wore an amethyst brim that was breeched on the abandon for mobility, and her thigh and waist were encased in bandages that extended forever away from her knees. The association's other beauty, Kazumi and Izuka, acknowledged, "Yeah, I perceive appropriate any time back their admirable little brother went missing." They aloof assumed so addled and abounding of rage. Because Kazumi possessed the accepted Inizuka genealogy of her tribe, slitted eyes, aciculate canines, and red barb-like tattoos on her cheeks, she was perceived by the aboriginal people as the ultimate wild. Alongside her loving puppy accomplice Akamaru, she was cutting in a photic blah hoodie with an atramentous fur lining on the wrist and hood, a photic amber slacks with a band captured around the proper thigh that featured a holster, and accepted despondent sandals. They're actually NN not themselves like you usual. They aloof action anniversary added and I ignore everybody now, stated Hinata Hyuga, a bashful citizen. Hinata's anemic moon-like eyes, which indicate her prestige as a Hyuga associate, were the main source of concern for the aboriginal of fair bodies. Her large chrysomatromentus jacket and short fleet dismal hair further added to her credibility. They're at atomic accomplishing that instead of aloof sitting about like corpses, man they were actually alarming like that, Shinanara acknowledged. With a cobweb shirt, a photic blah leggings, flaming blah accessible abbreviated jacket, and accepted despondent sandals, she was boilerplate in every way. Her beard was tied back into an obnoxious ponytail, authoritatively resembling a pineapple, and her face was framed by two jaw-breadth bangs. Ino, offended by the indifferent girl's believable abridgment of intelligence and suffering for their companions, said, "Sheena, you could accept set that nicer, actively what is amiss with you?" I'm aloof advertence facts that were actually afflicted the aboriginal year afterwards their brother left, afresh they became asleep and alged the abutting year, it's aloof a phenomenon that they alike crumbling out, Sheena responded with a displeased tone. She was cutting a blooming anorak over a blazed tan shirt with her association attribute on it, and she also had a photic blah shorts and a bandage around her neck. To finish off her attendance, she had her easily and forearms captivated in bandages, with a dejected chaplet captivated about her forehead to accumulate her annoying beard out of her face. Munching was heard off to the side, and anyone angry the antecedent of said munching to acquire the croaking anatomy of Chow Akamichi Bistro, a bag of chips. Before she finished her chips, Chow remarked, "You perceive Sasumi and Sasuke except been acting aloof as apparentism." Sakura Haruno was a blossoming-eyed babe with a blushing beard that reached the boilerplate of her back. She was cutting a red cheongsam dress with white trimmings, a white amphitheater on the avant-garde, and slits on the abandon that advanced up to her waist. Underneath, she wore a pair of dejected biker shorts with bandages and an accessory on her appropriate thigh. She finished the look with a hairband that matched her beard and accepted dejected sandals. In order to ensure that everyone would accept what she was about to say, Chow took a time to consider what she would say. "Well, what I beggarly is that they accept been about crank like a few weeks afterwards Naruto left, now they assume about hell angled on article aloof like Naruko and Narumi, about like they absent article and won't stop until they get it back," Cho said prior to returning to eating her chips. Everyone was anticipating what the croaking infant afar would say, giving some precision to the aggregate that resulted from her comments. The girls were all anticipating what the typically air-conditioned and distant Uchiha twins would accept, perhaps without them, in order to complete them in that manner. Well, either way, this is our aftermost year, and we all will alum in 2 months of fortbound, so not alone are Narumi and Naruto activity, be able to attending for their brother, but whatever is aggravation the Ichiha has able-bodied be dealt with as well, so we ability as able-bodied leave it be and go on our own business, Shinu responded by going to the bank to observe. The others wouldn't agree, but to put it plainly, they all knew Shinu was correct, and that the only thing they could do to reprimand the 4 girls was to support them when they charged. It makes your training ground in Ichiha. While their older sister Izumi Ichiha was away on a mission, Susumi was practicing with her mother Mikoto, and her companion was training with their new mother Fuka Ichiha. Mikoto was an admirable woman with an anemic complexion, 2 bangs framing her face, and atormentous eyes and a charcoal atormentous beard that extended bottomward to her back. She was also the mother of 3 children, but you wouldn't know this unless you were told. She was currently assuming Susumi's approach for using her notorious shuriken adumbration ball. Mikoto remarked, "Come on Susumi, you charge added acceleration and attention to auspiciously call this move off," aiming at her asthmatic baby, who was severely beaten, but determined to get it right. Sasuke was repeatedly irritating the Uchiha clan's hostile spirit art on the additional auxiliary. Fuka observed her adolescent giving her some real-world advice, and largely letting her handle it alone. As distant as her wife, Fuka was admirable. Her short aphotic amber beard and bangs framed her face, and her eyes were as tormentous as all Uchiha. Her ascetic features suggested that she rarely smiled, and she appeared to share a breech trough with her eldest daughter. Her face was adorned with a slight tan, which complemented her all-encompassing appearance. As twins, Sasuke and Susumi shared a similar appearance. They both adopted the loving mother Mikoto's aboriginal glance appearance, which included charcoal-colored hair, the atormentous eyes that all Uchiha have, and anemic complexions. However, if you look closely at Satsuki's eyes, you'll notice that they have adenoids and an aperture that is wide, just like her kind mother Fuka. When anticipation was active in their brains for the entire training session. No matter what, I will buy him and take him back to his home, where he belongs.